Executive of the Parsons Collective Learning Community.
Close enough. It's close enough. It's close enough. Local journalists would know our name is Parsons Cooperative Learning Community. Sorry, Michael. Just want to welcome you here. Michael always asks us whenever we're doing these, and this is a community resource paid for with community money, and that's why we always just say yes when it's here. Can I just remind you, there are young people in the building as well as in the audience, and I'd like them to take a positive view of democracy home with them, which means we listen as much as we talk. Please, okay? I know that we're passionate. I'm very passionate about certain things. Rob knows that. We've had our going, but it's always done in a polite way, okay? And it's a way that we be respectful of each other's opinions. So I'd love you to model that. The housekeeping that Michael will do is, if the alarm goes off, which is a continuous sound, just get out. Okay. I mean, I could give you lots of other advice, but the nearest door is there, so just leave if that's the case, all right? Thank you for being here, thank you for engaging, thank you for caring about Harlow, because I've worked in Harlow for 25 years now and I care deeply about the town, and I'm sure all of you do here as well, so all the very best. Please behave yourselves, okay? Thank you. I'll get out of your way. Thank you, Michael. I will, yeah.
Switch off the phone. Hopefully I won't use the microphone. I'll try and project as much as possible. I'll be passing the microphone to the candidates, etc. So bear with us on that one. As I said, great to have a question time. You know, around the country, different places are doing this. It's a forum for debate, and we've got about 80 to 90 minutes we crack on. And that's really important. Everybody gets to have their say as on every subject we have. We have about 8 subjects and then a miscellaneous questions in that way. As I said, Mr. Goddard's done the housekeeping. It's just, we appreciate no filming as well. There's filming going on, okay? So that's part of the rules here. So if you want to put your phone away there, that'd be brilliant. Thank you. Okay? There we are. Okay, so it's as simple as that. We're going to get through this. The whole event is being filmed and it will be on our site tomorrow. Okay? So we've got that. As I said, what we're going to do first is with the candidates, we're going to give them 90 seconds each to tell you why they think you should vote for them. Okay, we're going to do that, each candidate, and then we're going to open the questions, the different subjects. It's very much, so for example, education being the first question. Everybody gets a chance to answer that question. We'll come back to the person who asked that question, say, are you happy? There may be a second education question, or somebody else say, are you happy with what they said? Boom, after 10 minutes we move on. So it's not perfect, but this is what we're doing, okay? And then we move on subject to subject. All right, it is a forum for debate. It's listening and engaging and maybe learning something, even somebody you completely disagree with, you might say, that's a good point, that's a point, that point, we move. But that's where we go. So,
excuse me.
Yes.
Have all questions already been?
They have, Frank. Yes. But right at the end for miscellaneous, because you're such a veteran, and we respect you. Now, at the end, we'll come to you, okay? You've got a question there. I'm sure you've got a question, but at the end, Frank.
Yeah.
Good lad. Okay. So we're going to go to, as I said, through the candidates, and for 90 seconds, I am going to start with Hannah Ellis from the Conservatives.
I'll try and project too, but if you can't hear me, shout and we will get a microphone. I'm Hannah Ellis and Harlow is my home. My mum was a teacher at Durand's. My dad worked at a factory in the Pinnacles, and I grew up with my little brother in a cosy one-bedroom flat in Catherine's before moving to Old Harlow. I believe in hard work and personal responsibility, and that with the right support and encouragement, everyone should have the opportunity to fulfil their potential and freedom to make their own lives. From a paper round at 13 to working at Dorrington's through my education and taking night classes to get my legal qualifications, I've worked for everything I've got, and I will work for you too. I got my first taste of politics in 2010 with a newly elected Rockhampton. Since then, I've built up years of experience working in Parliament, government, policy and legislation. I know how to get things done, and I can deliver for you from day one. I'm standing to be your Member of Parliament because I love Harlow, I want to fight for you, and I know how to make your voices heard in Westminster. Thank you.
John Smith famously said, "The opportunity to serve our country, that's all we ask." Although that was said 30 years ago, it still really resonates with me. Although I think I would probably tweak it and say, the opportunity to serve my community, that's all I ask. You see, my background isn't in politics, it's in education. I spent 15 years as a secondary school maths teacher, and more recently I've worked for a homeless charity here in Harlow, and a charity that support unpaid carers. I've dedicated my life to service, to helping people, to supporting my community. And as a councillor for the past 6 years in Harlow, I've been out listening to residents all year round, working every day for the benefit of my community. And that's exactly what I will do as your MP. But if you take just one thing from this evening, it's this. You all deserve better than the government we have today. We all know that Harlow has been let down. But with a Labour government and me as your MP, that will change. Starting with a new hospital for our town, more police on our streets and in our communities, hope and aspiration for Harlow's next generation. It's time for change, but change only happens if you vote for it. So on the 4th of July, vote for change and vote for Labour.
Yasmin Gregory, the Green Party.
Good evening. I was not born in Harlow. I was born in Ilfracombe in 1963, and I was raised by my grandparents in North Devon because my mum walked out on me and my brother and sister when I was 5 months old. My grandparents were in their mid-60s, and they inherited 3 children under 4. Money was tight, and also until the day I reached 18, my granny mum, as I called her, she lived in fear that we would be taken from her and placed into care and separated. We were entitled to free school meals, and I can remember feeling ashamed as everyone walked up to the teacher and paid their dinner money, and I was only the one in the class that didn't. Today, in the education system, I would be a CLA, a child looked after. My classmates all benefited from a free education with free milk, and I attended university as a mature student with 2 children. That was in 1991. I moved to Harlow, as I say, in 1987, and then I went to Anglia Ruskin and did a law degree. I had an unconditional offer to go to bar school, which, as you can imagine from where I came from, was very, very excited. But then life happened. Bar school had to be put on the back burner, and I had to work out how not to get evicted from my house. Unfortunately, I was evicted, and I found myself housed in temporary accommodation. It was a porter cabin in Westfield. After 3 years, I'd remarried and moved to my present home in 2001. I was suddenly widowed, aged 42, and found myself fighting another eviction, but this time I was successful. I worked full-time, so I worked hard. I worked full-time and I studied part-time for 2 years. I passed my general diploma in law in 2014, then I studied part-time for another 2 years for my LPC, by which time I'd become a grandmother. Everything was going well, and I failed one of my modules for the 3rd time, so I had to use my redundancy money to pay for my course, and I studied weekends whilst working full-time. I put a lot back into education. I'm a school governor of 2 schools. I sit on 2 boards as a trustee. I understand children looked after. I understand that we are failing our 16 to 18-year-olds that are in care. We are failing with the housing. We are having people living in warehouses which are not fit for humans to live in at all. I believe that my lived experiences give an insight on what it's like when you've got to carry on living, when you've got challenges, and that is affecting so many people. For those of you who know me and who've seen me speak at public meetings regarding the Storm River crossing, you know I can't keep quiet, and I keep saying it's a blessing and a curse. If you vote for me, I will be your voice in Westminster, probably from the back or maybe the middle, but you can be sure that I will be heard. I will be heard loud and clear. So for real hope and real change, please vote for the Green Party on the 4th of July.
Leah Manham, Lib Dems. 90 seconds, please.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. We need real change after 14 years of Conservative failure. Broken NHS, crashed economy, crumbling schools, more food bags than we ever needed, and raw sewage in our waters. This is their legacy, and they must be held accountable. Now, if you look at the polls, we're heading for a Labour government. In that scenario, do we need a Labour MP who will blindly vote with them, who won't challenge them, and who won't stand up for Harlow? I'm offering the voters of Harlow a different opportunity to vote for an independently minded, strong voice to stand up for Harlow and stand up to the next government. My personal experience is that I was a project manager and I worked as an engineer. I'm a civil engineer by profession, and I've delivered on projects, whether it's on Heathrow Express or Jubilee Line Extension. More recently, I've been delivering on conferences and business events. I lived and worked in Dubai for 10 years before coming back here and settling in Stevenage. Look, I recognise that the Liberal Democrats are a small party in Harlow, and the two big parties will tell you that we're a wasted vote, that we are an irrelevance, that we'll never win here. But I think that's a disservice to the thousands of people who are fed up with the Conservative Party and the government, who are angry at the Conservative government, but cannot see real hope and real change in the Labour Party. So I'm offering you that option, to vote for an independent-minded, strong voice for Harlow. Thank you very much.
Michael Ferguson, Performing UK.
Evening, everyone. Hopefully I won't need this. Now, I'm not going to give you a mini biography. If you happen to be interested, there's one on the party website, but I actually don't think that's really relevant. I will tell you that I live in the constituency, and I've done so for the past 20 years, but I also recognise that when you vote, you're going to be voting for a party. You're going to be voting for policies and the values of a party, for the pledges it makes in its manifesto. So I'm not going to delude myself and say you're voting for me or any of the other candidates. You are going to be picking a party. And what I'm hoping, and one of the reasons I'm here, is to persuade you to vote for the party that you believe best fits the policies that you believe in and the values that you hold. For too long, we've had a duopoly where the Conservatives and Labour pass government backwards and forwards between them, and that's because of our broken voting system. We'll only change that if we actually vote for the party we believe in. So whether it's the Greens or the Liberal Democrats or Reform UK, if I ask you to take one thing away tonight, it's follow your hearts, follow your judgment, and back the party that best fits you. Thank you.
And finally, Mark Goff, who is representing UKIP tonight.
Well, thank you. It may be obvious to you, and probably to some more than others, that I'm not in fact a young lady called Lois Perry, who is the UKIP candidate on ballot paper. Sadly, at the weekend, Lois, who had a bout of pneumonia not so long ago, decided that she was no longer well enough to stand either as our newly elected party leader, nor as candidate for Harlow. However, she remains on the ballot paper. So for those of you who know and believe in UKIP values and UKIP policies, you still have the opportunity to vote for Lois, but this evening I will be putting the UKIP case. This is not unusual. They do say a week is a long time in politics. Well, when there's a month between nomination papers going in and an election, that's very true. And it's not unusual because here in Harlow, many of us may remember back in 2008 when, friends to many of us, Greg Peck died when the nomination paper had gone in and we had to stop the election. So it's not an unusual situation, it's just a very unfortunate one. UKIP have done very well in Harlow over the course of a few years. We're in the last decade. We go back to 2014 where we actually won the local elections here. And in 2016, many people remember that we won the EU referendum, and here in Harlow we polled 68.1%. We were the 20th highest in the entire country. I won't keep talking because there's plenty of time to ask questions later, and I will be looking forward to putting the UKIP case this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We're now going to go subject to subject. We've got 10 minutes. We'll ask all our candidates to be concise, brief, and don't hobble. I thought it was appropriate our first subject as we're in Parsons Academy, and I thought we'd go to education first. So I'm going to ask David Foreman to stand up and clear voice. Do you need a microphone, David? Okay, ask the question.
You said I've got a loud mouth. Good evening, candidates, ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary. My question is this: the latest school workforce in England statistics for the year ending November 2023 highlight that teacher vacancies have increased by 20% to 2,800 in November 2023. From a figure of 2,300 in the preceding year. Vacancies have more than doubled in the 3 years from 1,100 in November 2020. Temporary filled posts also increased from 2,100 to 3,700 over the 3 years to November 2023. Consequently, would you please explain what plans your party have to reduce teacher vacancies and how will the money be raised to pay for it, especially given all the other urgent public sector spending priorities?
Christmas.
Thank you for your question, David. Anyone that knows me will have heard me talk about my experiences in teaching probably tenfold, so I'll keep that to a minimum. But it's fair to say that it was actually education and the failings that I saw of this current government actually got me involved in politics, and a part of the reason that one of the big parts of the reasons that I'm standing here today. I think that there has been, over the last decade or so, a lack of trust in the teaching profession, certainly something that I experienced, and a drive towards a very narrow curriculum and a very narrow way of teaching. So first and foremost, to actually tackle the issue of recruitment and retention in schools, we actually need to back our teachers, to trust our teachers, and that's something that I know that myself and many of my former colleagues certainly haven't experienced. One of Labour's first steps when we come to power is to recruit 6,500 more teachers in those key subjects, including obviously making sure they're fully trained teachers, because we think that's very important. We also believe that there should be a broader curriculum. So, and I'm a former maths teacher saying this, so actually giving young people the opportunity to experience the arts, to experience music, to do more PE lessons, many of the things that actually schools, because of lack of budget, have actually cut. I've got a friend who is a technology teacher, and he will tell us how difficult it is for him to find a job, because actually a lot of schools have cut their technology capabilities. Now, that's a real shame if you're a maths teacher, because actually that's a real opportunity to have a very practical solution to mathematical problems. You're wanting me to finish, aren't you? And you know, the question about how we're going to pay for it, we've been very honest. It's not something that we want to celebrate, but we have to make some difficult decisions. A party of government needs to make difficult decisions, and that's why we're going to remove the VAT exemption on independent school.
Thanks, David. Like Yasmin, I'm a school governor too, so I'm very aware of the pressures that schools are under and the lack of teachers. We have had 27,000 more teachers since 2010, but I know that there's not enough. I know there's still vacancies, and I know there's more to do. This year, we've got 50,000 teacher training places available. We need to train more teachers, and there are grants in place to incentivise people into the classes and subjects where the vacancies are most. So I think that's important. I think we need to do more of that. But one thing I just wanted to recognise, I know teachers deserve all of our support and they're doing a great job. We should be proud of the fact that in Harlow, the number of good or outstanding schools has almost doubled to 85% since 2010, and we've had over 9,000 young people starting apprenticeships. So the main point of education to be the benefit of our young people, they are getting a great education and great opportunities here in Harlow. So I talked about some of the teacher training and grants that are available. A lot of these are already going on and will continue, but in terms of funding for it, the Conservative Party are looking at reforms to the welfare system, which has increased exponentially over the last few years and is significantly more than the school's budget in its entirety.
Thank you very much. Teaching is such an important job, an important role. So thank you, Dave, for your question about teaching. My father was a teacher, and I saw the amount of work they had to do while working as a school teacher, secondary school teacher. So given that, and given the priority we put on education, we need to make sure that we have a proper workforce strategy for teaching. At the moment, it's very sporadic. And there isn't a national strategy. So what Liberal Democrats are proposing is having a national strategy on workforce, specifically for teachers. And have an independent body to recognise what teachers should be paid. And based on that, have it fully funded year on year. So there's a process. It's not overnight. Anyone who says they can do it overnight, they're not really telling you the truth. Okay? This will take time. Teaching is such an important job that we can't just do it flipping a coin. We have to have a proper strategy and then have it embedded and in place. Just on a couple of things just around teaching and schooling, we will reform Ofsted. Get away from this single word that parents really rely on to decide. And I'm a governor as well as a parent, so I recognise some of the challenges with the Ofsted reports. To pay for it, look, we're going to look at taxation. We've already said that we're going to look at where we can pay money from either the big banks or the water companies and use that money, about 2 billion, to start investing in teachers, having a workforce strategy and making sure they stay. Because a lot of the teachers I know are fed up. They've got no capacity in them to carry on. And I want to make sure that we have a strong workforce that we can get in, young people to come into it as well. Thank you.
I'm not going to make up policy on the fly. If it's not in our manifesto, I'm not going to pretend that we've got something we're going to do. And if I'm going to be frank with you, when I looked at the education section of our manifesto, I was a bit disappointed. But then I looked at Labour's, which is 15 pages of pictures and waffle. And then I looked at the Conservatives, which is 3 pages and a bit more succinct and a bit more to the point, not a great deal in there. So I don't think any of us are actually particularly promising to address this issue. All I can say is current funding of education services is 10 billion below what its peak was in 2010, 2011. We are committed to put £5 billion extra each year into education. Whether the right thing to do is to put that towards recruitment and retention of teachers, actually I can't tell you, because the detailed policy of how we would deploy that money is not yet in our policies. We do consider education to be very important, but I'm not going to pretend we've got something we don't have. What I would make an observation is the figures that David gave actually seem to be quite a low vacancy rate. Now, I'm sure people working in the system will say it's a problem, and I'm sure it is, but I wasn't quite sure how much of a problem it was. And I'm not going to pretend that I do know. Thank you.
Thank you. Desmond.
Education should be about inspiring a love of learning and ensuring that every young person can reach their potential. So the Greens are making a renewed pledge to scrap university tuition fees. We believe that education is a common good that benefits society as a whole, so it should be publicly funded and available to everybody, free of charge at every stage of life. Schools play an essential role in ensuring that all children have an equal chance to thrive. So we must work towards ending child poverty and opening up opportunities to all. No child should be left behind. So the party said what we would do is that we would pledge funding for schools to £8 billion, which would include £2 billion for teachers' pay. We also have to remember the effect that Brexit has had on encouraging teachers from abroad to come and work in the UK and have the sharing of the different cultures. So Green MPs would push for an education system that is fully inclusive, with better funding support for special educational needs and all children provided with a free school meal. We support higher education students with the restoration of grants and the ending of tuition fees. And we would abolish Ofsted.
Well, again, David, I think you highlight a real issue, not just in education, but rather throughout public service. Retaining people has been a big problem. I think we need to do more to ask people when they choose to come out of the service, why they're coming out of the service, what it is that's driving them out. Is it situations where they're not feeling supported? Is it situations where they feel they're coming up against difficult pupils that are causing them problems? And also in terms of increasing the number of teachers that we actually have, there's no reason why, in my opinion, and my party's opinion, why education should just be, why teacher training should be a degree profession, because we had some very good vocational training that produced some very good teachers. And I think we need to bring that back. Again, like many other people have said, we have an essential situation where we have a teacher shortage, and if people are going to university to do a degree in teaching, that's an essential thing. That's why that is one of the many jobs that should not be subject to tuition fees. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We're only at 7:30, so David, you relatively happy with what you've heard? Okay, a quick, and then I'll just, as an observation to what you've heard, as opposed to a direct question. Thank you.
Several key points. No child should be left behind like that. Not so sure about abolishing Ofsted, it's actually driven up standards. And in the key years 2022-23, the number of schools good and outstanding went from 88% to 89%. It's worth remembering that in 2010 under Labour it was 68%. Chris's point about widening the curriculum is a very key point. We're supposed to impart learning and to create people for a knowledge economy. And Hannah's point about taxation, how to be paid, I'm not sure about welfare reform necessarily going to achieve it. I think Riyadh's point about taxation, that's the way it's going to really become. But of course, no one's going to know until they get to look at the books.
Thank you very much. As I say, I'm going to crack on with the questions, because I don't want us to run out of time. Later on, we've got a question from a Year 6 pupil at Pemberley Academy, who we spoke to last week, but we've got a Year 10 pupil from Stewart Academy, just starting out in education, so I thought I'd give a question, but a quick answer is to Lena. Here's her question.
Thank you. So I'm currently in Year 10. I'm about to start my first round of mock exams, and I'll eventually go on to do GCSEs, A-levels, and hopefully go to university. But with the current faults of the education system, such as financial cuts in the industry, is there any hope for a proper future for people my age and people who are younger at all in the future?
Anybody like to answer that one first? Hands up. Don't shout. Yeah, Riyadh.
Thanks for the question. Just to understand, there are opportunities in how you develop as an individual. The role of government, politicians, or anyone else like that is to facilitate some of that. So yes, there are expensive areas that we need to have a look at. Where can we cut down the costs of where you are going to be, whether it's at school, college, universities? How can we make sure, for example, the school, college, and universities, the buildings are appropriately done and fitted, not crumbling, we're not even there, right? So we need to make sure that we can deliver on our promises. And I keep saying this, it's important that when we promise something like this to a young person, we need to be able to justify it and say what specifically we're going to do. So in terms of just the money side and making sure you're not burdened with things, you know, we're looking at how we reduce some of those expensive areas that you're going to have to look at.
I want to throw the second questions out to everybody because otherwise we'll be too much. I'm just going to give this to Hannah and then very quickly Chris and then crack on. Otherwise we'll be here till 10.
I just wanted to say I can sympathise. I was one of the first students to pay the £9,000 tuition fees, so I understand why you would feel frustrated about that. But I just wanted to say, don't let it put you off. It is a loan that you don't take out until you're earning over a certain amount of money, and there are still grants available if you're from a low-income family to get that support. But if you don't want to go to university, thanks in large part to the work of what Robert Halford did, there are so many degree apprenticeships available now where you don't have to take out any loan, you earn while you learn, you get a degree at the end of it, you go straight into a work-paid job, and there are lots of opportunities to do that, in Harlow and further afield. And we've got loads of, I'm not sure what sort of subjects and stuff you're interested in, but there's businesses moving into Harlow all the time. We've got the science part, the innovation part, high-skilled, high-tech jobs that will all be there for you and future generations.
I'll be really quick, but first of all, really thank you for the question and coming here today and asking that question. And I think the fact that you're even asking that question shows how much work politicians like us have to do, because what we don't want to see is a situation where the next generation of people from Harlow are worse off than our generation. So thank you for the question. I think there is reason to be hopeful. I think there are huge opportunities. I think that, if we play it right, can be at the heart of the green energy revolution, for example, and there are lots of other opportunities. And right now I don't know what you were studying, I should chat to you about that. But I think there are reasons to be optimistic, but I'm sad to hear that, you feel that you need to ask that question.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now we're going to move on to the next subject. I'm sorry, Yasmin, we actually moved on. You took up a lot of time in your opening speeches, so we're moving on to health. Is Steve Tappenden here, please? Okay, Steve, do you have a question with you? You've got a question with you. We're on to health and a question from Steve Tappenden.
You're elected as our MP. What would you do to make sure that the promised move by the UK Health Security Agency to the pinnacles will take place, giving a much needed boost to local economy, jobs and businesses, and that the desperately needed new hospital will get built with no further delays?
I've had stories about new hospital 2024, 26, 28, 30, and I think I'm on to 32 now, in the 11 years. So on that basis, invite you to answer the question, and Yasmin first.
question. So, with the public health building, I've seen it go from GSK, actually worked in there, and to being a shell of itself. And then it was earmarked for testing in the Olympics. It's always had all these different labels that could be applied to it. What I would like to see is, I would like to use some of this lift and shift money from £29 billion that's been promised to us, to lift and shift PAH Hospital, to decamp patients up to that unit, and then we can start building on the hospital, repairing the hospital where it is. I can't see the point of going on and on about the hospital when they haven't even purchased the land. That's quite essential. If you're going to build a hospital, you need some land. So that would actually do that in the short term, and it would help with the hospital. I don't know what's going to happen to that building. I don't know the promise of jobs. We hear so many promises. I just want to see real action, and I just want to see that hospital fixed so people can be fixed.
Malcolm, UK Health Security Agency, a new hospital. What can you tell us?
Okay. I mean, in respect of the Health Security Agency, I think all backbench MP can do is lobby as hard as possible, both within Parliament and with the relevant ministries to try and get it done. I'm not going to say there's anything in our manifesto about this. There isn't. That detail isn't in there. So, as an MP, the question is, would I diligently and effectively lobby for it? Yes. Could I promise it? No. In respect to Princess Alexandra, I've actually had good cause to spend some time in Princess Alexandra, but not as a patient. I can see that it needs rebuilding. What I would say is hospitals need a minimum catchment population. They need a minimum size to have critical mass. So this doesn't actually only affect this constituency. A rebuilt Princess Alexandra will have to also serve patients from North West Essex and East Hertfordshire. So there are a lot of complications to it. I'm not going to pretend I know all the answers. I certainly think it's needed. There's certainly lobbying in Hertfordshire for additional hospital capacity. So I suspect it will happen, but exactly what form it takes and when, I don't know.
Chris?
Give us a promise. Give us a date.
Thank you for the question, and generally, I think there's a key theme already coming down, that people in this town feel let down. I've spoken to our party leader, Keir Starmer, a number of times about the new hospital for Harlow, whenever he's come to Harlow, and I've got a firm commitment that the next Labour government will ensure that the new Princess Alexandra Hospital is built. And that's something that I, as my personal point of view as your MP, I will make my top priority. And judge me on that record, absolutely, but I will do everything I can in my power to ensure we get a Princess Alexandra Hospital. Comment was made earlier that it's very likely we'll have a Labour government. If you have a Labour government, you've got a Labour MP in Harlow, I'll be banging on the door of the Prime Minister to ensure that Harlow gets the new Princess Alexandra Hospital that it desperately needs, because the current one is falling apart, and many people in this town are hugely disappointed by, frankly, empty promises from the current government. The new 7A junction. Coming on the Health Security Agency, if I may, I'm not going to make you any promises about the Health Security Agency, other than the fact I share your disappointment. I've been having sort of regular meetings with Michael and Martin, who've been involved in that project, and I have to say, last time I had that conversation with them, there were some very glum faces, because actually the cost of that project has spiralled out of control, and that's another example of mismanagement of the economy, unfortunately, by the current government. I absolutely want to bring investment to Harlow, I want to bring high-tech jobs to Harlow, and that's something I will endeavour to do.
Thanks, Steve. I want to see both moving to Harlow. On what was Public Health England, I share your frustrations on that. The whole structure of that got redone during the pandemic, and I think there have been conversations about what and how that now moves. That is frustrating, and if I was your MP, I would want to get stuck in there, work out what is happening, and make sure we still bring it to our town, because it's going to provide so many opportunities. We've already had lots of businesses and enterprise spring up around that in the sort of life sciences sector, and I would like to see that continued. On the new hospital, when I was working for Rob, I worked on a lot of the campaigns for both of these things. I will do everything in my power to get it here. It is committed to by the Conservative government. They've already spent £10 million on all the plans and preparation work for it, and the site is being negotiated at the moment. Chris may have had commitments for the new hospital from his bosses, but they have also committed to reviewing all capital funding going into the NHS. So they've made two separate commitments there. Which one it is, I don't know. But the Conservative Party is firmly committed to the new hospital. I've spoken to the new hospitals minister twice since I've been selected in the last few weeks, and he's come to Harlow to speak to me about that on one of those occasions. So if I'm your MP, I will fight day and night for both of those things until they are open to the public.
Look, the UK HSA and the hospital are just two examples of broken promises by the last Conservative government. You cannot get away from that, right? They're broken promises. Where you've got a Conservative MP and a Conservative government, that's what's happened. Having a Labour MP and a Labour government, it's not going to change it because he's had commitments, right? So I'm just going to put that out there because it's really important. Look, as an MP, what I can do and what I promise is within the first 100 days is have a public meeting with me, if I'm elected, with me and all the stakeholders from the hospital and the agency. Because my previous work is about delivery. And this is not about hard-working MPs. This is about hard work. By the way, you should expect MPs to work hard for you. That is not a USP, and nor is it a badge of honour. It should be about delivery. And I will deliver, within the first 100 days, that consultation, a public conversation, in here or wherever, with all the different stakeholders. Because what you can't do is sit here and they're going to ignore you. As an MP, I can bear that pressure onto them. Come to the public, talk to them, explain your ideas, explain your strategy of how you're going to deliver both the hospital and the agency. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. The biggest issue, quite clearly, on this one is the fact that we are getting a bit fed up of a lack of conversation, a lack of feedback, a lack of clarity. And if I was in that position, I would make sure that we got some clarity ASAP from the minute I was elected. Simple as.
Thank you very much. Steve? You're okay. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to go on to the cost of living now. We've got different questions of variety. And again, we're trying to crack on with these questions. They are different in some way. Andy Thornton from Trussell. Have you got your question with you? Would you like to?
I had my voice.
Fantastic.
The levels of universal credit in Harlow is about 1 in 10 households, about 1 in 20 used the food bank last year. That the correlation between the low levels of welfare benefits and food bank use is clear. What is your view on the levels of poverty in Harlow, and what hope can you give to people who are stuck in the poverty trap?
Andy, thank you for your question. It's a sense of shame, and it should be a sense of shame to everybody in this room, that we currently live in a country which is one of the most richest in the world, but we still have double the amount of food banks in this country than we have McDonald's. I'm not going to comment on whether we've got too many McDonald's or not. Look, again, judge me on my record, but if I'm elected MP on the 4th of July and I'm standing in a hall with you in 5 years' time, I want to be saying that the levels of poverty are considerably lower than they are now. And if I fail on that, then I failed the people of Harlow. Let's be frank and honest about that. We absolutely need to get our economy back on track, and we need a government that's going to bring a stable economy and stop playing fast and loose with government finances, because that's how we get a sure foundation and actually bring down costs. I think that one thing we absolutely can do as one of our first steps, as you know, is the introduction of GB Energy, so a publicly owned energy company that can bring down bills, because we need to bring down, as you say, the cost of living. We've also made a commitment to a new deal for working people, which includes a real living wage for everybody, and ban some of the terrible employment practices. But what can I do as an MP? Well, the answer is to work with you and your colleagues to tackle this issue head on. We need to look at the reasons that people go into poverty, but ultimately, we need to bring down food prices, we need to bring down energy prices, and the way we do that is bring in a stable economy and a stable government, because we haven't had that for so long, unfortunately.
Thanks, Andy. I don't want to see anyone struggling, and I just want to say thank you for the work that you and others do in the Harlow community to help those who most need it. We've had a very difficult set of years. We've had a once-in-a-century pandemic, and we've had the worst energy crisis since the 1970s, thanks to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. The government during that time has spent hundreds of billions of pounds, it's almost unfathomable amount, on furlough schemes to support people, on cost of living grants, on energy caps. There has been a lot of government intervention in this area. I think the best thing we can do is get as many people into work as possible and make sure that that work pays. I know it's difficult for people who are working and are on low pay too, but the Conservatives introduced the national living wage and have increased it every year since it was introduced. The rise this year was a £1,800 raise for those on the lowest pay. So I think that's important. And I think the biggest thing that we can do for the cost of living and pressures on people's pay is to get down inflation. And today it was announced that it got down to the Bank of England target of 2%, and I'm hoping that will start to ease pressures on people's spending and finances.
Thanks, Andy. And thank you also for the work you do for the Harlow Poverty Alliance. It really is very much appreciated. So yeah, we're the 6th richest country in the world, and there are now 7.2 people living in food insecure households. That's 2.1 million of state school students are eligible for free school meals, but 800,000 who are living in poverty don't qualify for that. How much would it cost to get rid of child poverty? What price can we put on that? Well, the Green Party suggested a figure of 1.8 billion to get rid of it, and that would lift 1.1 million children out of poverty, 800,000 out of deep poverty, and 300,000 out of poverty. So where are you going to get 1.8 billion? Well, we can tell you already that 500 million has already been spent on the illegal Rwanda scheme. If they keep going off that, keep bashing on about sending people to Rwanda, that's going to go up to probably about another 2.5 billion. To implement the National Service Voluntary scheme that was recently announced, that would cost 2 billion. So I would say, let's use that money to get the children out of poverty.
Thanks for your question and the work that you're actually doing. Look, we are the 5th largest economy in the world, so 56th, and we've got a crisis in our systems. So the question you really have to ask yourself is, where's all the money going? There's a lot of revenue coming in, where's the money going? With regard to poverty specifically, there are things that we can do. So, food bills. We can reduce our food bills by having local British farmers work and get the food here, rather than relying on foreign imports. So the Liberal Democrats have already pronounced a £1 billion investment in the farming sector to make sure that we can have British food on British tables. The second thing is, if you look at your homes where energy bills are rising, right? So we've said we will insulate the homes, especially of the poor people, that we can make sure that their bills don't rise. The third thing, I'd say, look, children are going to schools, particularly from poor people, from poorer backgrounds, and they're going there without any food. So we're going to give primary school children, secondary school children, free school meals. And I think what the two-child limit, the two-child benefit limit, is another reason why children and the parents are being poorer as we go through. We are the only party, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, who will remove that. Right? We will, these two guys will tell you they can't do that because they haven't budgeted for it. They'll tell you they haven't thought about it too much because they've got other priorities. But I'm saying to you, Liberal Democrats will remove that. Thank you.
Okay. We believe the best way of getting people out of poverty is to incentivise work, is to reduce their bills, and we intend to go about it in a number of different ways. I mean, one is we'll reduce the level at which you start paying income tax to £20,000 to incentivise people to work, and so people who are working keep more of their own money. We also do not accept net zero carbon. Politicians and the media tell us that this is the way to go, but actually there's no scientific consensus. When you say that, but there's a lot of scientists, eminent scientists, Nobel Prize winning scientists, thank you very much, who dispute that, who say that it's impossible actually for carbon dioxide to drive climate change. So we would scrap net zero carbon, which means that we would take green levy off of energy bills. We would also take VAT off of energy bills.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
We're
everybody.
also going to reduce the levy on petrol by 20 pence per litre. We're going to investigate price fixing in supermarkets and stop it, because there is undoubtedly price fixing in supermarkets. So our aim is to reduce people's bills and to let them keep more of their own money. That is our strategy for poverty.
Okay, thank you very much.
Chris? Anything? Mark?
The only trouble with going last every question is a lot of stuff's been said. The big thing about cost of living is very simple. The fact that we are in a country where there are people at all making a decision between eating or fuel bills is an absolute disgrace. There is no question about it, and the idea that there is a government or anyone who doesn't want to do something about it is wrong. Let's be straight about it. Now that means that what we have to do is we have to get fuel bills down, we have to get food bills down. It's that simple. And if that means getting rid of ridiculous taxation, we've got to get rid of some ridiculous taxation. We also need to help people who are going into food banks, and because we've got to make work pay, and work has got to pay, and we've got to get people off benefits. We've got to get people with more money in their pocket to make their decisions, and that's the way to go.
Thank you. I've got a few other questions on this topic, but we're going to have to crack on. It's almost 5 to 8, so I'm just going to go to one of the other questions and then get maybe 2 people to answer it. Mr. Wilkins. Mike, are you? Yes.
The UK's government borrowings are unsustainably high. So, in view of the cost of living problems, which everyone's aware of, what are the top 5 areas where the candidates' parties would make cuts in government spend to reduce taxes and leave people with more of their own money to pay their bills?
What cuts are you going to make? cuts we're going to make.
Not enough cuts.
Ria.
This might be a poison child's question, I think.
Don't accept the premise of the question, it's dodgy. We've had enough cuts, 14 years.
Thank you. The question and the answer, take it from there. Thank you, folks. We've got a lot to get through. Thank you.
I mean, look, that was going to be my point, because I think if you're going to talk about cuts to services, if that's what you're talking about.
No,
What
you
kind of cuts?
assume that.
Yeah, I'll ask you, what kind of cuts are you talking about? Well, okay, look, there's only several things you can cut.
Are you saying all government expenditure is necessary,
So-
good, and provides services to the...
Let me just answer this. So there are areas you can cut, you can try and make efficiency.
Thank you. All right? We're going to stop here. It's very simple, okay, with this meeting. The questions and the answers, all right? If you can't do that, then the doors are open. Thank you.
I think we have to look at what you can cut and what you can't cut, right? I'm not going to give you an answer that saying we're going to cut this, this, and this. We have to look at where we can create efficiencies in a real way, not just arithmetically on a piece of paper. Where can we have efficiencies and still deliver the services that people need, right? That's really important. Because certain people do need support and we do need services. We do need our schools to work better. We do need our health service to be better. But we can't go down the road of saying cuts is the only option. Investment, I would argue, is a better option to have growth in the economy, better outcomes for our children. And then you can say, how do you reduce the national debt? Because national debt is not going to go in just like that. This will take time. This will not be an overnight thing, and this will certainly not be based on promises. This has to be hard work with all the different stakeholders to identify where we can be more efficient in our tax policy and also make sure that we still keep the services that we need.
Thank you. Chris Vince.
Thank you for your question. It's interesting, isn't it, that we've had 14 years of austerity, but actually we've had the national debt tripled in that time by this current government. So it's clear that austerity doesn't work. It cuts hard, it affects people's lives, it damages people's lives. It actually isn't an effective way of running the country. Labour have produced a fully costed manifesto. We have more than just the pay numbers in our manifesto. And we have said how we're going to pay for the things that we want to do. We're not going to make promises that we can't keep. We're not going to make huge policy statements ad hoc that we can't afford to pay for, but we are going to do what we can to stabilise the economy and to ensure that we have get back Britain's future, frankly. We've talked about the VAT on private schools. We've said that we're going to look at how we cut many of the tax loopholes. The current government said they were getting tough on tax, but we know of the huge numbers of cuts they made to HMRC. I know my mum was one of them. And we're going to have a windfall tax on the oil and gas companies. We know that the next Labour government is going to be inheriting one hell of a mess. This is, someone said it's like, inheriting, it's like 1997, but times 10, the mess that we're going to inherit. We need sensible policies, we need sensible leadership, and we need a real plan to actually tackle the massive issue that this economy is facing, and that you will get under Keir Starmer's leadership and a Labour government.
Thanks, Mr. Wilkinson. So a couple of savings that we've identified is one I mentioned earlier about welfare reforms, £12 billion in that. Such a large proportion of our government spending goes on welfare, and to improve people's life chances and well-being, we do need to be spending that on schools and health and other areas as well. So that is one of them. And the other thing we've identified is getting the civil service levels back to the staffing levels we had pre-pandemic, because it grew a lot to deal with, understandably, a lot of the pressures and administration that used to happen during that time. I don't think it's all about cuts, though. I think the way to get out of that debt is about growing the economy. So I very much want to see lower taxes. I want to see our businesses growing and investing, creating more jobs, people having more money in their pockets, spending more money in the economy, and our economy growing, which will also impact on how we we pay back that debt. And just quickly on the VAT on private schools, that's something I absolutely don't agree with. All it is going to do is put more pressure on the state systems, more children going into the state system, and that includes with SEND schools that seem to have been caught up in this as well. So I don't think that that is a spending answer for Labour's policies.
I'll keep this short. We would tax the billionaires and the millionaires. If you've got £10 million of assets, you can put your hand in your pocket because you have been taken out of this country. You have had the free education. You had all the help that you wanted. We would be taxing fuel companies. We would tax the big businesses like the Starbucks. We'll stop all these loopholes where they're opening up offices in the BVI, in Switzerland and Malta, and all these little pockets just to escape their payment of tax. Those with the broad shoulders, they've had their share, they've made their money. How much is enough? It's time to be putting back into society. We've got a crisis, so let's fix it all together.
So time's now on 8:05. Just another one which we'll do quickly. Peter Hennigan, you got a question on it? Would you like to see it?
No, I'm not going to read it.
You can read it, okay.
No, so I'm not going to read it.
Any questions? Off you go.
What we've heard so far, we've had a shortage of teachers, we've got a shortage of nurses, we've got a shortage of care workers, etc. We've got a massive welfare budget of £60 billion, I think it is, going on to universal credit. So why do we not get people on universal credit? And I don't mean people on universal credit that are actually working. Why don't we get people on universal credit into work? If the average minimum wage is £10, work 100 hours for the community, fix our paths, fix our footpaths, tidy up things, tidy up rubbish. And as an ex-employer, when you interview somebody for a job and they come to you to say, no, I've been working, I've been doing this, you think that's great, that person gets off their backside, it will be good for you. If somebody comes to you with no work experience, you can't judge them. So, thank you.
I'd have to agree with you. We think universal credit is a very
manifesto.
Sorry?
Is it in your manifesto?
All right, I'll tell you what is in our manifesto. It's very much about growing the economy, incentivising people back to work, and people naturally going back to work because there are more opportunities and better opportunities and they keep more of their own money. That would be our progression. We do think universal credit is a badly designed system which disincentivises people. So we would be looking to change that.
Yeah.
So this is a wider question, right? So one of the reasons people are on universal credit or other benefits or other welfare bills so high is because they can't work. And one of the reasons they can't work, one of the reasons is the health of themselves, right? Now, you can argue about people who are taking nick out of that, of course you can. But the majority of them are in that situation. So we need to fix why they're there. We need to understand why that's the case, rather than spinning off into let's give everyone a job, push them to do something they don't perhaps want to do. So if we look at the health system, how can we improve our health system? The Liberal Democrats have put NHS centre front of the manifesto. Because if you don't have a healthy workforce, it doesn't matter how much opportunities you have, they won't be able to work. And the welfare bill will go up and up and up. Right, so we need to make sure how we can actually get people back into work without forcing them. The health of the nation is so important. We have said we're going to make sure we put money into improving people's health, whether it's prevention is better than cure. So you've got to make sure you've got the campaign to make sure children and young adults don't go into bad habits in terms of food. You've got to make sure that the doctors are enough so that people can have a GP appointment when they need it within 7 days, which is what I promised them. So look at the health of the nation. We can worry about the wealth at the same time.
Thank you. crack on to another subject. We've got quite a few to come. I want to go to crime, and I want to go to Gary Roberts. You need the microphone, Gary?
I'm not very well, so I'll ask this question very quickly of the Conservative candidate. In 2019, I asked Mr Halfman about his government's view on having fewer police officers, fewer prison officers, and fewer probation officers in the England and Wales criminal justice system. That created a backlog of 32,000 cases in the courts. He said that as a result, an open left in the Treasury in 2010. Now we have even fewer police officers, prison officers, and probation officers in the England and Wales criminal justice system, with now a 66,000 case backlog in the courts. As a Conservative candidate, are you proud of this achievement? If not, why not?
Okay, Hannah. Courts backlog, cases 25, 26, solve rates 2%, 4%, criminal justice system. Sorted out.
Thank you, I'll try. I'm afraid I'm going to have to dispute some of your facts and figures there. I don't have the numbers for the number of probation officers that are currently in the system, but both in Harlow and in Essex, we have more police officers than we have ever had. In Harlow, we have 30 more police officers this year, and in both forces, that's more than we've ever had. So I can't agree with you that there have been cuts to that. I know that there's more work to do on crime. There's been a lot of investment into a hotspot policing and pilots going on in Harlow that's been tackling antisocial behaviour and serious crime in the town centre, and antisocial behaviours dropped by 30%. I know that if you're a victim of crime, it might not feel like that to you personally, but those are what the stats from Harlow and Essex Police are showing us. So I know there's more work to do. I know particularly I would agree with you on the courts backlog. A lot of that was not sitting during COVID, and a lot of it was done online, and there is catching up to do, and I know that that's a problem for our police forces, but I dispute your initial figures, I'm afraid.
Opening about the criminal justice system, about crime, how people feel safe in Harlow. Just generally open discussion there.
Thank you. And thank you for your question, Gary. I spend pretty much every week, every day, knocking on doors, listening to residents in Harlow and the villages. And it's the number one concern that comes up to me is a lack of visible policing and an increase in crime. This nonsense about the Tories have got record numbers of policing, right? That's taken 14 years to get back to the levels of policing we had in Harlow in 2010. With a larger population, and we've had 14 years of not enough police in communities, on the streets, working with residents, doing that intelligence work, understanding their communities. So there's no wonder that people like Gary and people in Harlow feel badly let down. We do need to get police back on the streets and in our communities. I would also add, on this figure of record police numbers, there are 400 less police staff in Essex than there were 14 years ago. So many of those police are being asked to do staffing roles rather than actually be on the streets and in communities. Labour will prioritise community policing, get police back on the streets and in our communities, working with residents and community groups. But it's more than that. And I will use an old New Labour slogan. It's a case of being tough on crime and tough on the causes of crime. And much like the issue of health, we need to actually get to the root causes of crime as well, which is why Labour are going to introduce a Young Futures project to get youth workers in schools, in hospitals, and working in the community as well. We need to tackle the issue of crime. A statistic was brought up to us yesterday when we did a hustings at Harlow College of the huge increase of knife crime. And I know Yasmin knows Mel very well as well, but you only have to spend 5 minutes with Mel Hotwood to feel absolutely crushed by the failures of our current system to tackle the issue of knife crime. Labour have pledged to half knife crime in the next decade. I'd like to see us go further. We will ban the sale of machetes, all these horrible ninja knives that people are using, but we will also be tough on the causes of crime as well, which is where our respect border comes in. But first and foremost, we need to deal with this root cause. We need to get into schools and actually educate young people about the dangers of being involved in criminal activity. But if anyone tells you that the you feel safer after 14 years of Conservative government. They're kidding you, and you all know that. Thank you.
I've said quite a bit about this actually when we had the local elections hustings. I'm very pleased that I don't have a leader of my party who helped a previous leader bring in early release, because I tell you what, if there's nothing that's going to stop criminals, it's the thought that they actually could get out on the streets by an early release. I'm sorry, criminal justice, if you get a term of 10 years, you serve 10 years. That's it. The next issue is the fact that we need police on the streets. We had years where police used to be out on the streets preventing crime. They haven't been. They've been stuck in offices filling in forms and doing anything but. We need them out on the streets, we need them visible, and we need them preventing crime. And the big issue we have in Essex on that front is, as I said, in the local elections. We have a problem with police coming and starting their training in Essex, doing their training in Essex for 2-3 years, and then when they've done their training, they go and join the Metropolitan Police because they can get a larger wage. And frankly, if you can get a larger wage for your job, who can blame them? So what we actually need to do is do something about the fact that in the home counties, we need some kind of home counties weighting so we can maintain police officers. Thank you.
So, the Green Party would invest £11 billion in restoring the Ministry of Justice, restoring the budget. What's really important is we would restore legal aid, because that's where so many people are not getting true representation. We would make sure that local authorities are properly funded to deliver youth services, including the youth workers who play a role in keeping young people safe. And safeguarding is a priority in encounters between the young people and the police. We know that there's distrust there. We would also make sure that children and young people are never strip searched without an appropriate adult present. And we want youth workers, rather than police officers, to work with the pupils in schools. Now, we've heard about the police, and we've heard about the pressure they're under, we've heard that we've got so many more police, but we don't see them. And you can vouch, I was with you at this Stowe, and we reported a crime being committed in front of us, and I waited 20 minutes until that call was answered. I think we need to actually improve that, and I think we can only do that if you put more resources in. It's no good playing with numbers. They may have brought in so many, but also a lot of police officers have left.
When was the last time you saw a few police officers on the street, on your high street, on your Andrew Street? This is a notion that we've got 20,000 new police officers, they keep saying the Conservatives, but actually that's only true if you realise that previously, 4 or 5 years ago, the 20,000 police officers left because of the cuts by the Conservative government. So that's really important just to keep bear that in mind, right? So we've said we're going to try and replace that and restore community policing, trusted local people who can be visible as well, make sure that they're there. We've also said that all burglaries will have a statutory guarantee that they will be attended to by the local police officers. People are fearful of these things, and we need to make sure that they're not, because they see the police officers, they know they will come back, not wait 20 minutes, and make sure that that's there. Look, in terms of the criminal justice system, there is a backlog, we know this, but we're going to invest in it. We can't just leave it to chance that it will somehow get lower and lower and lower. We've also said that the police and crime commissions, we're going to scrap that. It's become so politicised unnecessarily. We'll replace that with a board of local people and people who actually understand the criminal justice system. And in terms of reoffending, because I think one of the things is people do reoffend, so we're going to put more effort into making sure from when they leave prison and before that, to make sure reoffending rate is lower. because at the moment it's just too high. And look, on addressing the issue about knife crime, we're going to take a preventative approach to this, a public health approach, if you like, and work with teachers, local authorities, local experts, and yes, care workers, students themselves, and people who are involved in this process, in this ecosystem, and work out what do we do about knife crime. Where is the cause of knife crime? Yes, it's gangs, and yes, it's drugs, but how do we stop that? There's no point having police officers on the street if there's local crime going on. We need to understand the root causes of that crime and try and tackle it from a preventive measure. Thanks.
Okay, Gary. What was that, Gary? Yeah, just a quick one, then we're going to move on to housing.
I don't see how the Conservative candidate can actually claim that she changes my figures and she hasn't got them in front of her. So I expect she goes back to the drawing board and actually looks at the facts. We have no police officers in Wall Street that actually come and serve the community. We need community police officers out on the streets, similar to the neighbourhood policing that we had all those years ago. Until that comes back, the people of my area will feel unsafe. And we are an elderly and retired area in Potter Street, and we need that to change. And hopefully, whoever gets in to become our MP, they will actually address that as soon as possible.
Thank you, Gary. Nick Taylor.
Yes, good evening. Across the country, there are more than 600,000 empty homes, many owned by foreign investors, and thousands more unused as holiday homes. All the main parties appear to have only one solution to solving the housing crisis. That is, they are hell-bent on getting hundreds of thousands of homes built each year, with the loss of green belt land and land occupied by commercial greenhouses used for food production. As things stand, supply will never meet demand. Developers only build in numbers which keep house prices increasing, inflates their profits, and using a timer, which means they have a substantial land bank. What other steps, if any, do your party propose to take to end the housing crisis?
Chris Vince.
Thank you very much for your question. And someone that's worked for a homeless charity, I know the huge issues that people face in terms of housing. As anyone who knows a bit of history will know, homelessness has gone up in the last 14 years by 169%. I think we do need to build houses, which is where we'll disagree. I think we need to avoid using the green belt at all cost, which is why Labour are talking about the release of low quality green belt land, grey belt land. The example of that locally, I suppose, would be Hatfield Heath, but what we don't want to see on Hatfield Heath is £1 million houses that local people can't actually afford. What Labour are talking about is actually changing the planning laws to actually take powers away from developers and actually give powers back to local councils and local communities, because actually we do need developers to build their fair share of actually affordable and social housing. And we also need to ensure we don't have the same situation we have up at Gilden Park, which is something above bear in mind, where actually the developers don't provide the infrastructure that they promised to provide at the last minute, if they do at all, and that's a huge issue. The issue of land banking is a big one for Harlow. It's a huge issue, and again, that's how Labour are going to reform the planning laws, actually to say you can't be land banking, and if you don't use it after a certain amount of time, we take it away, because land banking has caused a huge problem in Harlow, as you and I discussed before.
Thanks, Nick. I think this is an issue about supply and demand. There's not enough supply and there's too much demand for it. I'm not sure if you were suggesting this with your question, but I don't agree with taking away empty homes from people. I just, as a Conservative, I don't agree with interfering with people's property rights. I think it's a slippery slope to go down, and I think it's one of the great things about our country that we're respected for, so I personally wouldn't support interfering with that. I think it is just about building more housing, appropriate housing, and I know it needs to be affordable too. Harlow Council, under the Conservatives, have made a really good start on this, and I truly think are leading the way. This year they're building 103 council homes, which is more than Labour did in their 30 years of control of the council, totaled up. We've stopped the warehouse conversions in Harlow, which I agree were horrific, and we're prioritising Harlow people for Harlow housing. So the housing list, and this is something that the Conservative government nationally is now looking to commit to, but in Harlow already they've reformed the housing waiting list so that local people will have priority for local housing.
Right. Disappointed as I am not to have had the chance to answer the question on crime, or stick to housing. We actually are committed to net zero immigration, which significantly reduces pressures on the housing market. Well, that's what we're committed to, so it can't be lies, can they? The Conservatives are committed to building 1.6 million new houses over the next term in the next Parliament, and Labour 1.5 million. But if we have net zero immigration, we'll not need anything like that. We still will need to build some to ease the housing market, but we won't need to build nearly as many. What we are committed to doing is providing incentives, whether they are tax incentives or planning, easing planning on brownfield sites. And that's where we'd like to see new housing built. There's a lot of brownfield sites in this country, and that's where we'd like to see new housing go.
Ria. So, housing is clearly a really, really important issue, for not just for here, but everywhere else. And I would also say that we do need to build homes. We've committed to 380,000 new homes, and it's important that we build it with the right infrastructure around it. Homes don't just suddenly grow up out of nowhere. You've got to make sure the infrastructure is there. We will definitely do that. The land bank thing, the reason developers do that is because they're allowed to do that. They can get away with it because the government allows them to do it. So we're going to say you either use it or lose it to developers. Because ultimately they can't just buy land, keep it for themselves, and develop it when they think it's appropriate. We have a process where we can actually build more homes and make sure that they are done to what the needs are. And the other thing I'll just say is ban all evictions. Reason is, part of the reason people have a housing issue is they're in rented accommodation at the time, and they're being chucked out, right? And they are allowed to do that. So we need to challenge all of these things. If these things don't happen overnight, and certainly these things happen by design, but we're going to make sure that the housing is #1 priority, because if you don't have the housing and the homes, you will end up with homeless people, more crime, more unrest in the community. Housing is such an important issue. Thanks.
Yes,
Thanks for the question, Nick. You know how I feel about building on the green belt, and it should not be allowed. And one of the travesties that we're seeing at the moment is how a developer was granted planning permission on the premise that they built 43% of the homes would be affordable. They then reduced that to 23%, and that was like, okay, yeah, we understand you're not going to make as much money, so that's fine. What the Green Party want to do, and what we pledge, is that we would be building 150,000 social housing, that's council houses. Between 2019 and 2023, 30,000 homes for social rent were built across England. So that's just, we're not going to fix this housing crisis, and home ownership will not fix the housing crisis. Homes should not be a privilege for the wealthy. Everybody's entitled to a roof over their head. One of the biggest problems we have with the social housing is that in 1980, when Margaret Thatcher decided to introduce the right to buy. One of the biggest flaw of that, of course, was that the money that was received for those houses, they weren't being used. You could not use that money to build more social housing, and that was really what needed. So what we also need to do, as Riyadh said, is we need to look at rent controls. We need to make sure that the rent controls are capped at the average of the market, of the average wage in where you are living. That will actually help to drive things down. Again, no fault eviction, that should not be happening. But it's really important that we need to make sure that everybody is entitled to a roof over their head and not be charged £385 a week for a bed sit. They call it, I think they call it, it's a social, well, I would call it a bed sit, but it's got like a toilet where you could sit in the toilet, put your feet in the shower and have a hand basin, but it's still a bed sit. So £385 a week, and that's in a converted office block in Harlow. Converted office blocks in Harlow are still very much alive and kicking because we are not solving this housing crisis.
Thank you. Nick Patrick had a sort of similar question, Nick, but we are cracking on. Is there anything else, something different you want to say, or you think any of your questions have been answered? Have a go, Nick.
Given that recently council housing allocation policy has changed the removal band 4 with most councils, had this further made council housing of last resort and made an excuse nationally not to build 100,000 homes a year in the next 25 years that would for the much needed council homes to be needed?
Didn't hear the question. Understand the question. Given the recent housing allocation policy change and removal of band 4, with most councils, had this further, we need to replace those sold right to buy, plus our next generations. We need to replace what has been sold.
Well, Harlow Council is building the council housing, so I'm really pleased about that.
100.
Yeah, but it's a lot more than Labour did. Labour had to give back the money the government gave them to
Stop the Green Party would actually stop the right to buy.
Okay. Nick, you just want to come back and then we're going to move on. Okay, we need to crack on. It's half stage.
Just to briefly say, as a former housing manager with Harlow Council, the only person that spoke any sense tonight and actually any decent policy was the Green Party. Just to put this in perspective, there's 100 houses going to be built in the next year. I'm not too sure they are, but actually the council will still have 500 less homes than it did in 2012. So put that in perspective, please.
Okay, we've got a few things to go and we'll have to rattle on. Georgia Midland, is Georgia here or will I read out her question? Okay. Yeah, no problem, so I'll just read out her question. Georgia's question is, are election candidates for Harlow going to make it a priority to stand for a ceasefire for Palestine and continue to fight for a ceasefire in Parliament? And as I said, please respect the candidates and what they have to say, even if you disagree. It wasn't Voltaire who said that, but I thought I'd just throw it in.
So, to put it on the record, absolutely I back an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. I think the events of October last year were horrendous, but the response from the Israeli government has been intolerable. For me, there is only one solution to the crisis in the Middle East, and that's a two-state solution with a recognised Palestine and a safe Israel.
Thank you. So, on October the 7th, when this terrible, terrible war started, the Green Party said from the very start.
Thank you. Carry on. Thank you. Respect Gavin, please.
We wanted a ceasefire from day one. We believe that the hostages from both sides should be released. And we have been clear and consistent in standing up for human rights. It's just, I know it's horrific. I have friends who live out in Israel, I have friends in Palestine, and everybody just wants this to end. And I think that it's very difficult when we are still supplying arms to allow it to continue. So we would be calling for a ceasefire, and we would be calling for the immediate cessation of the sales of arms. Thank you.
I don't think there's much to add personally. I think any form of war is horrific, and I think this one's been dragging on for far too long. We need, as a world, to actually get on board and finding a solution to this, because it's dragged on way too long, and anyone who thinks it just started on the 7th of October is plain wrong. It needs an agreed ceasefire, it needs a two-state solution, and we need to get round the table and do it. And if they won't get round the table, we need to make them get round the table.
Brian?
To answer your question directly, yes, it should be a ceasefire, bilateral ceasefire immediately. We were the first national party to call for it last year. When there was a vote in Parliament, these two parties voted against it. Let me just be clear about that. These two parties voted against a ceasefire, just one record. And yes, it's a two-state solution, based on 1967 borders. And we would recognise the state of Palestine, right? And stop the sale of arms to Israel.
I don't think anyone who can see what's happening in Israel and Palestine cannot be horrified by it. It's awful to see innocent lives being caught up in this conflict. I do support a ceasefire, but as part of that, I think that the hostages need to be released, and that Hamas, which is a prescribed terrorist organisation, needs to step down so that another government can form for Palestine, because I want to see peace and I want to see a two-state solution too.
Of course we want to see a ceasefire. Who wouldn't? Who wants to see any civilians killed? But I think the premise of the question is a bit simplistic, really. I think we can call for a ceasefire, but it's a bit of an empty call, isn't it? Haven't Hamas recently rejected the latest peace proposals? Have Hamas ever renounced their intent to destroy Israel? No, they haven't. Have Hamas ever accepted the two-state solution? Do the people of the West Bank actually want to be in the same country as the people of Gaza? This is far too simplistic to what is a very complicated and intractable problem. And actually, I don't accept the premise of the question. Yes, we should have a ceasefire, but it's going to be a lot harder getting there.
If they don't want to be,
Okay, thank you. We've got to crack on because I've really covered a lot of subjects. We've still got a few quick fire questions, and so I'm just going to see how we go. Okay, Kay, ULEZ, do you have a ULEZ question? In one part. Whilst we're waiting for the question, sorry, Anna, just whilst we're waiting for the question, when we come to your conclusion part, candidate, and you sum up in a minute, can you give a feel of why you are for the particular party? What makes you a candidate for that party? If anybody's in doubt, say, I'm not entirely sure. I don't use the word you need selling one, but why are you in that party when you're part? Okay, crack on.
Okay, thank you very much. ULEZ has featured a bit recently, or recent months, in fact, very recently here in Harlow, although we don't have it in Harlow. So I would really appreciate a bit of clarity. Whose idea was it? What is it? Why was it introduced? what are its effects, and what's your stance on ULEZ? Easy peasy.
Hannah.
My stance is quite simple. I oppose ULEZ. I think that the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, Labour, they're rolling out anti-motorist measures across the country, and Wales and other parts of the country too. I'm completely opposed to it. In Harlow, there are 16,000 motorists driving to London every day, mostly for their jobs. The people who are hardest hit by this are the people who can't afford to upgrade their cars, and if you don't live in London, you don't get any of this part of any of the schemes that can replace them. But all of the commuters, in our town and towns around the city are being affected by this. So, if I was your candidate, I would fight to get rid of ULEZ, to stop any of those traffic measures coming out to Harlow, to keep fuel duty low, like our previous MP campaigned on for many years, and to support motorists out working.
To hell with the children.
Those are my priorities, thank you.
Thank you. Chris.
I think the short answer that Kay wants me to give is Boris Johnson. But look, the reason that this policy was introduced was to deal with air quality in London, and actually we do need to tackle the huge issue of pollution in the capital. But let's be very clear, there are no plans to extend ULEZ to Harlow, and I would not support them unless there was support for motorists in Harlow to upgrade their vehicles to be compliant. Actually, the majority of the cars that go into London are actually ULEZ compliant. And if the Conservative candidate was so pro-motorist, perhaps she could have a word with her friends at County Hall and sort out the state of our roads. Because I have to say, it's always about piles, isn't it? Seriously, the biggest cost I've experienced over the last few years with my car has been the damage caused by potholes. And I'm delighted, and again it shows that actually my party, the Labour Party, is on the doors, listening to residents, understanding the issues they face, have committed a sum of money to actually fix 1 million potholes in the next Parliament. Because actually, with the state of the roads as they are, that is causing a huge cost for residents, for motorists who just cannot afford it. And at the moment, with the public transport system as it is, people have to use their cars.
Thank you. So, yeah, quite rightly, ULEZ is not coming to Harlow, and I don't think that anybody would want that extra charge. We can't afford new cars, we can't afford cars that are compliant with it. What we can do, what is available to us, is to fix the travel infrastructure so that you would not want to be using your car. We would be bringing down the prices of these ridiculous train prices to travel into London, £25 a day. It is not sustainable at all. What sort of salary do you have to have so that you can afford to pay that amount on just on fares alone? With the issue with the potholes, I'm with you, Chris. That has such an impact. If you think that would actually deter people from driving in their cars anyway. We hear time and time again, since 2020, I've heard that we've got money available to fix potholes. Apparently, this is only available to Rod Stewart, because nobody else is getting theirs fixed.
Okay, I really need to crack on. I think, as I said, I don't have this question to hand, but I was down at Pemberley Academy in Rivermill. I'll get back to you as a sort of miscellaneous bit right at the end, okay, so if you want to respond to that. So we actually are a miscellaneous bit. Pemberley Academy, the whole day on green issues, every student, all the parents in, and a young man called Ryan from Year 6, it's a news item we have, and his question was really on, and short about the environment, the green. Clearly the Year 6s of all schools seem to be really concerned, about the future of our planet. What are your concerns? And it's a bit of a general question, but I'll make it up as I go along. What are your concerns about the future of our planet, and do you share them with Year 6 pupils all over the town? Mark.
It's difficult. I think we've got situation where you have to see whether you believe or not in the whole green agenda. There's an issue with future energy, and I think people are looking at the future energy situation and they're saying one of the things in the UK is why, when we're an island, why don't we lead the world in tidal energy? We have some massive tidal flows around the country, and instead of using them, we are covering our green and pleasant land in many cases with windmills that just don't deliver. But the point is, if you are going to seriously tackle the environment issues, you need to take on the biggest polluters. And frankly, we're not fighting them.
Keep it out 45 seconds, I know it's hard. Yasmin, Green Party.
Yeah, you all know how we feel about the environment, and we know that it's very important to the children and also to the young people who are getting so anxious about what we're going to do. So I've apologised for the way we've left it, but we would stop fossil fuels. We do not to be digging for fossil fuels. We would not be issuing licences to enable fracking. It is all wrong. We've got enough natural resources, and as for the pollution of the rivers, we have to stop that. We have to hit this. It's the big businesses which are polluting the rivers. And another thing that we must do, we must leave our trees, because they help our pollution. They help cleanse the air, and the Year 6 student would have known that. Thank you.
Ryan, Beverley Academy.
Great school, great area. Little Pond, great councillors. Maggie and Tony. No, in all seriousness, and this is a really heartfelt message to Ryan, you know, we can't let down the next generation. We do need to tackle this issue, we need to tackle it quickly. We need to keep to our environmental targets of 2030 when it comes to, and you know, I'm sorry, there is a crisis, there is a climate crisis. We do need to tackle it, and anyone who tells you that there isn't a crisis and the planet isn't heating up is wrong, frankly. You only have to speak to eminent professors like Brian Cox and others who will tell you that the planet is heating up, and we want to leave the planet for Brian and Brian's children and Brian's children's children that is in a good condition. Labour have set out many policies on the green issue. The top one, of course, as I mentioned previously, is the setting up of GB Energy. That will be a publicly owned green energy company that will give us energy security, so we don't have to rely on titans like Putin, but actually will tackle the issue of climate change. Like Yasmin, we absolutely reject fracking as a solution to our energy needs. I don't think that having onshore wind is a waste of time. I think actually it's a solution to the issue of renewable green energy in this country, and I would absolutely be supporting that. We do need to get this right, and I think for all of us, whatever political party we're in, to hear that from Ryan and the concern, and you know, I used to be a teacher, this is a concern that young people have because it's their future ultimately, and we do need to get this one right.
Thank you. I do think the environment is very important. I spent some time with farmers in our constituency recently and heard from them about how the changes to weather are affecting their crops, and you know, this is a very real problem now and for the future. I think we've made a good start on this already. We've already halved emissions in this country, but I want to get the right balance. I want us to reach net zero, and I want us to care for our environment, which I care very much about. But I don't want that to be at a cost on ordinary working people, or to see taxes rise on things to pay for that. So I think it's about getting the right balance. I also think we should be taking up the new technologies when they come up and making the opportunities out of that, and that's something that Harlow's has done great at already. We've got in the college there's a training centre on electric vehicles, and I think we should be making the most of the technologies when they become available.
I've got an annual go. And I don't want her growing up, when she's an adult, to where the climate crisis is actually getting worse. So we've all got vested interest in this. So we do believe in climate emergency. We think that we targeted net zero by 2045. How are we going to do that? We want to make our homes warmer and insulate them. We want to use renewable energy and expand the incentives for households to use solar energy and solar panels and have a fair price so they can put that money back into the national grid. We'll invest, like I said, in renewable power so that 90% of the UK's energy is from renewable sources. And maintain the ban on fracking, and also maintain a start ban on new coal mines. We'll definitely do a windfall tax on the big oil and gas companies, and also have a just transition so that the oil and gas workers can translate over to renewable areas. And in terms of the natural environment, we want to plant 60 million trees, which is achievable, and that will help us. 6 national parks, that will help us. And in terms of the pollution in the water, one of the causes is companies dumping sewage into the water. We need to stop that, to get clean water in our rivers. That's a priority, and we can actually do that ourselves. Thank you.
Thanks. Just 2 more things I'm going to do. I'm going to ask Emma from the business, Rob from the business community, and to ask a quick question. I'll do a couple of candidates. Let's know when you're ready. Yep.
Thanks. Yeah. So Harlow is home to many small businesses like ours who are on a journey of expansion and growth. But we find that the current business rate regime makes it very difficult to move to larger premises, to move to a high street shop front, or perhaps to expand to multiple premises. It just becomes unaffordable when you suddenly go from full relief to zero relief in a very short step. What would you do to address this significant barrier to growth for small businesses?
Barriers and growth to small businesses. Chris.
Thank you for your question, and I'm very keen that the next Labour government is a friend to business and a friend to small and medium-sized businesses. It probably hasn't helped that over the course of the last government, business rates have changed 26 times. You know, you're constantly living with that uncertainty. I want to work with small businesses. The Labour Party is determined to work with small businesses to ensure that they have that business tax rate relief that you're talking about. We're also going to introduce a national wealth fund to actually put investment into small businesses to help them grow. There's a statistic, I think it's, I'm making this number up now, but it's about 2/3, I think, of people working in this country are actually working for, in the private sector, are working for small and medium-sized enterprise. So it's clearly, it's the lifeblood of our community, and I think that for too long that you have absolutely been forgotten.
Thank you, and thank you for the jobs and opportunities you're creating in our communities. I also completely agree that all businesses, but particularly small and medium businesses, the lifeblood of Harlow. You're creating jobs and wealth for our town. So thank you. I want to see lower taxes for all businesses. When you have lower taxes, you can spend more money, employing more people, growing. And if you've got a problem looking for premises, I'm sure that our Conservative Council will be happy to meet with you to see what properties are available, and I will be happy to do the same if there's anything I can do to help.
Just a quick one on the business rates. We said we'll abolish them and replace them with a commercial landlord levy. There are ways of actually supporting businesses rather than just hammering them, so we will abolish those rates. And we'll invest in new technologies that helps businesses and improve the high street as well, where the local businesses are, a lot of local businesses are. So abolish the business rates.
Thanks. I just want to ask, everybody else has submitted a question.
What was the question on twinning as well?
Yeah, but I've had to crack on. I'm very limited in time. Yeah.
Let's have the question on twinning. Quickly.
Twins with Habitat in foreign Czechoslovakia and Stavanger in Norway. One of the purposes
Strip are experiencing death, hunger and destruction at the hands of the Australian state as we speak. Twinning is one of the ways of showing solidarity with those facing this horror. Will the candidates support the proposal to twin Harlow with Rafa?
Okay. The twin was Saranga, the twin was Elise McCougan. Yasmin, should we a gesture? Twin.
I think it takes more than a gesture. I mean, it's a very difficult situation that the people in Rafa are in, and I think to twin, I think it just seems a little bit twee at the moment, because when I think of twinning, and I may be wrong, when I think of the twinning that we've done and going across to France and changing, the exchange of culture. And of course we could do that when we were in Europe, in Brexit. I'm obviously still in Europe geographically. And I think it would just make it very difficult. I'm afraid I can't give you an answer, but I think anybody who would want to be twinned with Harlow, I believe that we as a country should always be extending that hand of friendship to anybody who wishes to be here with us.
I just want a question from Frank Jackson, who he asked, and I think it's only fair that Frank asks his question.
Global spending on nuclear weapons in 2023 was $91 billion, a record, with all 9 nuclear weapon powers increasing their own spending. Do you believe that this makes the world safer? Regardless of your answer to that, what should be the UK's contribution to achieving a nuclear weapon-free world to which they are committed in principle by both parties and all the 5 permanent members of the Security Council who are the primary nuclear powers in the world?
It's an emotive issue and an interesting one, because we need to have a look at defence and all our commitments that way. In an ideal world, would we need nuclear weapons? No. But we're not in that world. We're in a world where we do have people who will do us harm. And we've got to make sure we can defend ourselves. One of the biggest priorities, single priority, I think the main priority of the government, of any MP, is to stand up and defend the people. And so yes, I take your point that in an ideal world, we do want to reduce the number of nuclear warheads and talk to the different stakeholders around the world, and listen to 5 members, but also other countries have nuclear weapons as well. So we can have that conversation, but in the meantime, I think we do have to be conscious of the fact that there are people out there who will do us harm, and we've got to be able to defend ourselves. It's a last resort defence, admittedly, and we, the Liberal Democrats, have said that we will support NATO much more, match 2.5% of our GDP, right, on the military and the defence spending. And also with regards to the army has got cuts by the Conservative Party previously. We will go back on that and replace the army personnel to more than 100,000. That's our commitment. But to your point about nuclear weapons, yes, in an ideal world, ideally, yes, we should reduce the number of nuclear warheads, but we're not in that world, unfortunately.
And Hannah.
What about the twinning? You got off the twinning, you got on to another.
The question now, thank you. You want to sit down, please? I'd appreciate it. Can you sit down? Sit down. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. I'll be quick. I support nuclear deterrent. I'm afraid I don't think the world as it is, we can do anything but have a strong nuclear deterrent. And I'm very concerned about what's happening between Russia and Ukraine. And yeah, as I said, I completely support the nuclear deterrent.
The word deterrent.
Yeah.
What if, when the deterrent fails?
Well, I hope if we
Which
keep
it
funding it
certainly
properly, it
will.
won't be failing.
Well, you know the answer, Councillor Swords. The Labour government, the next Labour government, put the security of our country first, and we would renew Trident, and we've talked about the triple law for that. I can't answer your question in terms of funding, but I know that we have committed to 0.7% of GNI to go towards global development projects. So I don't believe we get poorer by making other places in the world. Sorry, get richer by making, get the right round. Don't get richer by making other parts of the world poorer.
And finally, Yasmin, the right round.
I've got two sentences here. The Green Party would dismantle Britain's entire trident nuclear deterrent and remove all foreign nuclear weapons from UK soil. We would, however, keep the NATO military alliance because we believe it has an important role in ensuring the ability of its member states to respond to their threats and their security.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm now going to ask each candidate, as I said, thank you, Chris. No, he hasn't, and he's not going to, and we're going to crack on with the conclusion. Thank you very much. About a minute, and I should go for them. Thank you. Mark.
I'll give you these 6 great reasons for voting UKIP. Number 1, fix the cost of living crisis by scrapping net zero and green taxes. Number 2, fix the housing crisis by putting our own people first on housing lists and ending mass immigration. Number 3, fix the small boats crisis by pulling out of all international conventions that stop us deporting illegal immigrants and foreign criminals. Number 4, fix the lawlessness crisis by ending soft sentencing, woke, politically correct policing, and get really tough on crime. Number 5, fix the NHS waiting list crisis by stopping mass immigration. And number 6, fix the food security crisis by using good farmland to produce food and stop using it to regenerate electricity or grow trees. Stop mass rewilding to save the planet. Thanks very much.
Thank you. We go over to Malcolm, Reform UK.
I'm not going to change my approach from earlier. You should.
Thank you.
You should decide for yourselves who you're going to vote for. I would
Thank you.
advocate that you actually look at our manifesto, which is really quite detailed. I'm sorry I didn't get to answer the question about small medium enterprises, because we've actually got a number of very practical solutions for small medium enterprises. And I think there's a range of things where we've not covered today, which you would find interesting in our manifesto. As for myself, I'm in Reform UK because I want common sense policies for ordinary people. I think Labour used to offer that a long time ago. I think they now take our vote for granted, and that's why I've moved. I used to be a Labour Party member, but that's why I've moved to Reform UK and why a lot of people have. So have a look for yourselves.
Thank you. Look, I'm been a member of the Liberal Democrats for the last 5 years, and one of the things that's attracted me to it, I think that's one of the questions you asked, is we want to talk about practical, sensible policies, not theoretical stuff, right? So we've said and committed to making sure everyone here in Harlow has got a GP appointment, you get it within 7 days. You don't have a week on end. Everyone who needs a dental appointment, you can get a dental appointment because we'll invest in that. Anyone who is looking to make sure they get personal health care when they're older, you get it for free. These aren't just promises. These are actual practical policies that will help you. I was a member of the Labour Party. This is not a running joke, right? But ask me why I left. I left because of Iraq. I left because of WMD. I left because of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, right? Liberal Democrats have provided me a comfortable home in those policy areas. The other two parties do not. So if you want change, and you want real change, away from the right and the left, because I don't think most of you are right or left. I think most people just want, in the middle, get on with their lives, sensible policy that will help them and their families, and then we can do that together. Thank you.
Before we finish, this is free entry, but there is a bucket for St Clair Hospice at the back, so it says free entry, but after the whole thing, because anybody would like to, we'd really appreciate that. Yasmin Gregory.
Thank you, Michael. The reason why I chose to be a member of the Green Party was because socially it aligned with my beliefs. I believe that we should be looking after the more vulnerable members of our society. You heard my story. I'm nothing special. Where you are, that's where I was sat 3 years ago. But as I said, I could not keep quiet. I could not sit back and watch the country crumble, watch our schools crumble, watch the education standards fail. So you may have noticed I've had to look at my notes. Because as I said, I'm not a polished politician. I'm not used to standing up and quoting political statistics. I haven't studied politics as a subject. I studied law many years ago. But what I wanted is a fairer, greener country. And what we would do and what I would do is I would be pushing the Labour Party, if they are going to be the next government, which I'm sure they will, I would push them to be ambitious, to be brave. You've got your seat, now make it work. So what I am offering is real hope and real change, and you can download this from our website.
Thank you. It's clear from the debate tonight that Harlow needs change. Amongst other things, it desperately needs a new hospital. It desperately needs safer communities. Desperately needs roads you can drive on. And it's very clear that the next generation need and deserve a planet that is fit for the future. You've all got the power to make that change if you use it. And if you're serious about change, and I certainly am, then make your vote count and vote Labour. I know the difference I can make as MP for this town. I will never take your vote for granted. And the only way we're going to get rid of the Tories in Harlow is voting Labour. So in the words of Steve Jewett of the Newtown Neurotics, it's time to kick out the Tories.
So why am I Conservative, first of all, because I think that was one of the questions. I tried to set this out in my opening speech and talked a bit about my values, but I absolutely believe that we and the community and the government should be there to support the people who need it, but otherwise I believe in hard work and personal responsibility, and that we should create opportunities for people to fulfil their potential and then give them the freedom to make their own lives. But before any party allegiance, I'm here to stand for Harlow. I'm the only candidate here who was born and bred in Harlow, and the only one with the experience and the knowledge to deliver for you in Westminster. Your Labour candidate tried to stand for Parliament in Colchester, Stortford and Chelmsford twice before he ended up here, and your Reform candidate has just told us that they're a former Labour member, so in more ways than one, a vote for Reform is a vote for Labour. I will fight for you for lower taxes, immigration and crime, to deliver our new hospital, rebuild our town centre, and for more opportunities for future generations. Thank you.
That concludes the evening. I'd like to thank you to all the candidates for being brave enough to stand, brave enough to come here. I'd like to thank you all for attending. The film of the event will be on tomorrow on our site, and then we'll break it down into the bite-sized issues. Again, thank you very much for coming to our Hustle and Question Times. Thank you, and good night.